For centuries, science operated on the principle of classical physics. The universe is a predictable, deterministic machine, like a giant clockwork mechanism. Reality exists independently of the observer. We merely measure its absolute state. But in the early 20th century, a single experiment shattered this foundation. Introducing a paradox so profound, it suggests that our consciousness is not a passenger in reality, but its primary architect. This is the central inquiry of quantum consciousness, the unsettling possibility that the mind does not merely observe the world, it collapses the world into existence. The double-slit experiment is the smoking gun of this new paradigm. When tiny particles of matter, like electrons, are fired at a barrier with two slits. When unobserved, they behave like waves, creating an interference pattern on the screen behind the barrier, as if they passed through both slits simultaneously. This proves they exist only as potentials. When observed, the moment a detector is placed on either slit, the particles immediately choose one path, behaving like simple, solid particles. The wave pattern instantly collapses into two distinct lines. The implication is staggering. The mere act of conscious observation forces a state of infinite possibility, the wave function, to collapse into a single concrete reality, the particle. The universe seems to know when we are looking, changing its fundamental nature to avoid detection. The reality we perceive is not constant, it is observer-dependent. To definitively rule out simple technical interference, physicists created even more confounding variations. The delayed choice experiment. The decision to observe or not observe the particle is made after the particle has already passed through the slits. Astonishingly, the particle still retroactively changes its past behavior based on the observer's future choice. This suggests time itself is malleable and entangled with the observer's choice. The quantum eraser. This experiment involves erasing the detection information after the observation has collapsed the wave. When the information is erased, the wave pattern miraculously reappears. This proves that the collapse is not caused by physical disturbance, but purely by the presence of knowledge or potential knowledge within the system. The conclusion is unavoidable. Information and consciousness are fundamental components of reality, and the universe exists as a field of potential until our mind imposes actuality. Part 2. The mechanism of collapse. Orchestrated objective reduction. The traditional Copenhagen interpretation simply accepts the wave function collapse as a given, without explaining how or why consciousness is special. It draws an arbitrary line between the quantum world and the macroscopic world. However, many physicists argue that consciousness must play an active physical role in the collapse. The most coherent and controversial theory linking consciousness to quantum mechanics is orchestrated objective reduction, ORC-R, proposed by physicist Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. The theory posits that consciousness is not an emergent property of complex neuronal interactions, but a quantum processing occurring inside the brain's microtubules, tiny hollow cylindrical protein structures within neurons. Microtubules as qubits. The tubulin proteins within the microtubules are proposed to act as quantum bits, qubits, maintaining states of superposition. Orchestrated reduction. When the quantum processing within the microtubules reaches a critical threshold of entanglement, it triggers an objective reduction, OR, a moment of self-collapse caused by Penrose's theory of quantum gravity. This OR moment is experienced subjectively as a moment of consciousness. The term orchestrated suggests the process is tuned by synaptic inputs, memory, sensory data. ORC-R provides a physical mechanism for how consciousness could interact and select reality. It states that the mind, through quantum processing, is actively choosing which possible outcome of the universe becomes manifest. The universe exists as a field of potential until our mind imposes actuality. The human mind is constantly dealing with non-local phenomena through quantum entanglement. Entanglement is the state where two particles become linked, sharing the same fate regardless of the distance separating them. ORC-R suggests that the microtubules maintain a state of entanglement across vast networks of the brain. When the objective reduction occurs, this non-local quantum computation instantaneously collapses a reality that is consistent with the entire entangled state of the observer's mind. Therefore, the mind is not localized, it is participating in a vast, non-local, instantaneous computation that defines its reality frame. Part 3. Consciousness and the nature of time. If consciousness collapses the wave function, we must re-examine the nature of time. Physics already suggests time is not a flowing river, but a static landscape, known as the block universe theory. In this model, the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, fixed within the four-dimensional space-time block. If time is static, then our subjective experience of its flow must be created by our consciousness. The now is simply the narrow slice of the block universe that our consciousness is actively collapsing and experiencing. The sense of movement from past to future is the sequential orchestration of collapse moments by the mind. The quantum experiments, like the delayed choice, suggest retrocausality, that our actions in the present can influence events that have already occurred in the past. The quantum consciousness model embraces this. If reality is a field of potential until collapsed, then the future potential, the goal or expected outcome, influences the present collapse moment. Our mind, in its non-local entanglement, is subtly pulling the past into alignment with the future reality it intends to create. This mechanism provides a scientific framework for the power of intention and visualization. Neuroscience contributes by showing that the brain actively measures and constructs time. Our perception of time is highly flexible, slowing down during trauma or speeding up during monotony. The ORC-R theory offers a physical clock. The frequency of the objective reduction moments dictates our subjective sense of time. A slowing down of these quantum collapses in the microtubules results in a subjectively longer moment, explaining why time seems to slow down during emergencies. The mind is not just perceiving time, it is physically generating its temporal experience.
Part 4. Paradoxes of Consciousness, Schrödinger's Cat and the Many Worlds. The problem of observation is dramatically highlighted by the Wigner's friend paradox. Imagine Wigner's friend is inside a sealed lab, performing the Schrödinger's cat experiment. Wigner is outside. The friend's view. The friend performs the experiment and sees the cat is definitely dead or alive. The wave function has collapsed for the friend. Wigner's view. Until Wigner opens the door and observes the friend, the entire lab, the friend, the cat, and the apparatus exists in a superposition of friend sees cat alive and friend sees cat dead. This paradox forces the issue. At what point does collapse occur? The simulation ends when the ultimate, most conscious observer gains knowledge. The paradox implies that the entire perceived universe of the friend, and potentially everyone else, remains in a state of probability until a higher level consciousness, Wigner's, finalizes the state. This is the ultimate expression of the solipsistic glitch. Only my collapse is truly final. To avoid placing consciousness at the center of the universe, many physicists favor the many worlds interpretation, MWI, proposed by Hugh Everett III. MWI states that the wave function never collapses. Instead, every time a quantum possibility is realized, the universe splits into multiple parallel realities. In one universe, the cat is alive. In another, it is dead. However, the quantum consciousness model co-opts MWI. The mind is still the deciding factor. While MWI says all worlds exist, The conscious observer is the mechanism that determines which branch of the infinite reality tree they experience. Consciousness is the mechanism for navigating the multiverse, not destroying possibilities. A key counterargument is decoherence, which states that the quantum state collapses instantly when a particle interacts with its complex environment, heat, air molecules. The quantum state is smeared out. Quantum consciousness theorists respond that decoherence does not explain collapse. It merely describes how fast the quantum information leaks away. The challenge remains. Why does the information need to leak, and why is the consciousness of the observer always the last necessary step for final objectivity? The environment only suggests a collapse. The mind finalizes it. Part 5. The Esoteric Echoes, Ancient Wisdom and Quantum Physics. Long before the 20th century physicists discovered the quantum field, ancient traditions described a reality based on pure potential and illusion. Maya. In Hindu philosophy, Maya is the illusory, transient, and sensory appearance of the world that we mistake for absolute reality. It is the concept that the physical world is a magnificent projection, an illusion of separation. Brahman, the absolute, unchangeable reality that underlies Maya, is pure consciousness, the unified field of being. The parallels are striking. The uncollapsed wave function is Brahman, the pure potential field. Our collapsed sensory world is Maya, the temporary, observer-dependent illusion. The realization that the observer is intrinsically linked to the observed state is a core tenet of Vedanta philosophy. The perennial philosophy, which claims that a single, universal, all-encompassing truth or consciousness lies at the root of all religious and mystical traditions, finds its most literal scientific translation in quantum physics. The idea of the unified field, a single, universal, all-encompassing field from which all matter and energy arise, is the core goal of modern physics. Mystics and spiritual teachers across traditions have always taught the same concept. All things are one, emanating from a singular source of pure consciousness. The mind, being a part of this fundamental field, naturally retains the power to influence it. The quantum world is characterized by the quantum leap, the instantaneous jump of an electron from one energy level to another without traversing the space between. This non-local jump is instantaneous and non-linear. In the spiritual context, this mirrors radical personal transformation or enlightenment. When a person shifts their consciousness, their focus, their intention, their belief system, the collapse moment changes, and they instantaneously jump to a new, higher probability reality, a new branch of MWI, without having to logically work through the steps. This provides a mechanism for instantaneous spiritual healing or manifestation based on a quantum shift in the observer's state. Part 6. The Quantum Mind in Neuroscience. Biological Evidence. Stuart Hameroff's initial interest in the quantum mind came from studying anesthesia. Anesthesia does not damage neurons or stop electrical activity. It selectively blocks consciousness. Crucially, anesthetic gas molecules bind to the nonpolar, hydrophobic regions inside the microtubules, the exact location Penrose hypothesized for quantum processing. Hameroff argued that by binding there, the anesthetic molecules prevent the necessary quantum coherence and objective reduction from occurring, thus turning off consciousness without turning on the brain's classical electrical function. This provides compelling biological evidence that consciousness is a quantum effect linked to these specific proteins. When the brain is intensely focused or in deep meditative states, it produces high-frequency gamma waves, over 40 Hz. These waves are associated with insight, peak performance, and the binding of sensory information into a unified, conscious experience. Quantum consciousness theorists suggest that gamma waves are the macro-level electrical signature of the underlying quantum coherence in the microtubules. The synchronized firing of vast numbers of neurons at the gamma frequency is what allows the quantum computation to reach the critical threshold required for orchestrated objective reduction. High coherence equals strong collapse and a vividly realized reality. If the mind is quantum and non-local, as entanglement suggests, then traditional psi phenomena like telepathy, clairvoyance, remote viewing become logically plausible. These phenomena are simply instances where the non-local entanglement inherent in the brain's quantum structure extends beyond the physical skull. Telepathy, for example, would be the instantaneous, non-local sharing of entangled information between two coherent quantum brain systems. This explains why such phenomena defy classical distance limitations. Distance is irrelevant in the quantum field. The mind, being a quantum field, operates outside the classical constraints of space and time.
Part 7. The universe as consciousness, idealism versus materialism. The quantum consciousness model fundamentally shifts the debate between materialism, matter is primary, consciousness is emergent, and idealism, consciousness is primary, matter is an effect. If observation collapses reality, then idealism, the idea that consciousness is the fundamental basis of being, gains scientific footing. Reality is not a fixed material stage upon which consciousness acts. Reality is a manifestation of consciousness. Philosopher Bernardo Kastrup has championed analytical idealism, arguing that the only way to resolve the paradoxes of quantum mechanics and the hard problem of consciousness is to accept that consciousness is the only thing that exists, and the universe is the externalized mind of this single universal entity. Personal minds as modalities, our individual minds are simply localizations or modalities of this single universal consciousness, Brahman. We are islands in an infinite sea of awareness. Matter as a boundary condition of our localized perception, like a whirlpool in a river, where the movement of the water defines the temporary form of the whirlpool. This resolves the Wigner's friend paradox. The cat is never in superposition relative to the universal consciousness. It is only in superposition relative to the localized modality, Wigner. The final collapse occurs outside the simulation, at the level of the universal mind. The concept of a universal consciousness is scientifically echoed by the zero-point field, or quantum vacuum. This is the background energy of the universe, a sea of virtual particles that exists even in absolute vacuum, constantly fluctuating. This zero-point field is not inert. It is the ultimate, non-local information field. Quantum consciousness theorists suggest the ZPF is the substrate of universal consciousness itself, the infinite potential and information field that the localized minds, our brains, access and collapse into individual realities. The mind is a bridge between the physical world and the ZPF. Part 8. Implications, manifestation, free will, and the future. If the mind collapses the wave function, the esoteric concept of manifestation gains a precise scientific definition. Manifestation is not wishful thinking.
It is the deliberate and coherent orchestration of the objective reduction process. By focusing intention and creating a vivid mental state, a highly coherent quantum state in the microtubules, the observer increases the probability density of a desired outcome, forcing the universe to collapse to the reality that is congruent with the observer's internal state. The mind is literally editing the potential field of reality. Classical physics struggles with free will because a deterministic universe implies that all choices are predetermined. Quantum consciousness offers a solution. Free will is not the ability to choose an entirely new reality, but the ability of the conscious mind to choose which potential branch of the multiverse to inhabit. The moment of objective reduction is the precise physical moment of choice, the instant the mind selects one available future from the infinite options stored in the wave function. This choice is rooted in non-deterministic quantum processes, giving the mind true physics-based agency. The ultimate goal, both spiritual and scientific, is universal coherence. If every individual consciousness acts as a localized collapse mechanism, then a global shift in coherence, a widespread focus on intention, compassion, and peace, could lead to a collective positive collapse of the global wave function. This would effectively change the shared perceived reality, leading to a new, higher probability branch of the multiverse. The final conclusion is that the universe is not complete without us. It is an enormous, self-aware quantum computer, and our minds are the ultimate processors. We are not simply observing the painting, we are the brushstrokes and the canvas. The question is no longer, is the mind creating reality? But rather, what reality do we collectively choose to create?